When I meditate, I think because the brain thinks. And so meditation is about your relationship to that thinking.
Can we not think?
I don't think so. That's my experience. Can there be moments where thought is not present? Yes.
Yeah.
Why can I all of a sudden like speak Spanish the most fluently I've ever spoken it? But 2 weeks ago I couldn't talk to my friend in Spanish. Like, what happened here?
Hello, everyone, to another Word of Limits conversation. Today we have Virginia Jenkins with us. She's a mindfulness-based transformational coach at Holy Mundane and also a language and communication coach at Oren Relational English. I am not sure if I pronounced Oren correctly.
You did. That's exactly it.
Perfect. And so, yeah, she has a background in mindfulness-based clinical psychology. And for me, I think she embodies perfectly the integration of mindfulness, both in her transformational coaching and her language coaching. So,
thank you.
Today we are talking mindfulness.
We are. And I think the best place to start is, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it conjures up, when I was a therapist, especially, I would ask my groups, what do you think of when you think of mindfulness? And most people are like, mountaintops and like Zen and peace and harmony, like all these words that come with the marketed version of mindfulness that we often see, and those are the benefits that everyone's like, oh, it's calm and it's stress relief and peaceful and all this stuff, which are outcomes that can happen. And like, I'm all obviously, but like really for me, what it comes down to, and one of my favorite definitions is from Jon Kabat-Zinn, which is simply paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment.
Ooh. So presence and so say again. So say that the definition again, please.
It's to pay attention.
Yeah.
On purpose. In the present moment. And you can do all of that, and it could be lots of different things. But this the last part that's the key, which is the without judgment. That's the key, because we can do those other things with a lot of other mind states or intentions or whatever, right? With the intention to judge or the intention to try to keep ourselves safe or whatever. But it's the non-judgment piece that is what, in that particular definition of mindfulness, what makes it mindfulness and not one of the other things.
Yeah, no, and I love that is a definition, and it rings true to me. But I am very aware of the idea of without the judgment piece. That is obviously critical, but it is also so challenging, because I don't know about you, but for me, the judgment, that's something that is kind of built in. Like you have to judge.
Yes.
All the time, right?
Yeah, and judging, it's a function of the mind. Our minds judge, our minds think thoughts. And I think that's another mistake about mindfulness practices, like meditation, for example, where people are like, oh, it's clearing your mind, it's not having any thoughts. It's that, and I think that's taught in some schools, right, of more like the transcendental kind of meditation or those kinds of things where the idea is to clear your mind. That's not the kind of mindfulness I teach. That's not the kind of mindfulness I practice, because it doesn't ring true to my experience. It doesn't. When I meditate, I think because the brain thinks. And so meditation is about your relationship to that thinking.
Can we not think?
I don't think so. That's my experience. Can there be moments where thought is not present? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Can there be spaces and gaps? And can those spaces and gaps between the thoughts get bigger? Definitely.
Yeah.
However, that to me is an outcome rather than something we can actively do.
And is an outcome that only happens through meditation, or are there any other ways? Because, and I'm just talking for me, I try to lead a mindful life. Sometimes I do it better than others, but that's a goal.
Spectrum.
But I do not meditate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I keep trying. Sometimes I feel it's like, oh, okay, we are going to do this. And yeah, I'm there, I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably judging as well as I'm doing it. I'm not doing
Yeah.
it right, whatever, fine.
Yeah.
But
right? And that's often the biggest barrier, is that thought of, oh, I'm not doing this right, or it should be different, or shouldn't I feel like peaceful or whatever.
So is there any other ways to be mindful and to get to this point of bigger gaps without thoughts that don't require meditating?
Yes, 100%. Meditation is the most popularized, I think, in a lot of ways, but technically yoga is also a mindfulness-based practice. Martial arts, qigong, are all other formal practices. And then there's informal mindfulness, right? Which doesn't require any specific practice, but it's a way, it's bringing that quality of mind. It's bringing that quality of paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment to just what's happening in your life. Yeah. Right? So I could practice mindfulness literally right now as we're speaking, right? Because I could be speaking right now like, oh my goodness, what are we going to talk about? And how is this going to go? And, I just had a moment of like shifting my hair because I'm like, oh, how does my hair look? Whatever.
Yeah.
So that can all be happening. And I can either be noticing it, which is mindfulness and paying attention to it, whatever, and just taking it into account, right? Or I can be kind of mindless about it, not really paying attention, and it's all just kind of happening, and it's fine.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So what it is interesting to me, and I hope that you can maybe enlighten me a little bit, is so in this conversation, the ideal would be both of us are mindful, purposefully, here with the other and just paying attention to that without any judgment. But then there has to be thoughts. So if we are having a conversation, I find that the conversation it involves a huge range of elements. This being in your body and, paying attention to how you're feeling and also paying attention to the other person. But as well, there has to be your brain actively involved thinking thoughts so that there is a content, there is a message in the conversation. So that is all being mindful of the conversation.
It is.
So I'm not getting distracted with either the thoughts or the how am I feeling or how is she feeling or making guesses about it feels a lot.
No, it's a lot of things, and mindfulness isn't not having those things. It's noticing those things.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that's the trick, right? And that's where people, including myself, get hung up because, right, oh, if I'm mindful, it means my attention is 100% here and I have no other thoughts and I don't wonder how my hair looks because that's like mindfulness. No. Mindfulness is, look where I was, and then choosing to come back.
Okay.
Right. And that's something we can practice anywhere. There's some people who say, yeah, I don't meditate, but I like to sit outside and watch the birds.
I would be that person.
Right? That's a perfect example of a mindfulness practice. Because what do you do? I mean, when you're watching birds, you're paying attention to the birds, right? Then you have a thought. And then you're like, oh, I want to, and then you bring your attention back to the birds again.
Yeah.
right? And the great thing about informal mindfulness practices, there's less pressure, right? If I'm meditating and I wander off and I come back to the breath, oh my God, I left the breath and I was supposed to be meditating. And no, meditating, all it is. And it's another, I really wish I remember who said this, but it's like, it's just coming back. You're just building the muscle to come back. You're not trying to never go away in the first place.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I think that it is something as that when you're alone is something that I find can be more easily done.
100%. Yeah.
Because
for many
there
people.
isn't any, because there aren't any other energies interfering. And I am talking about the sensitive people, and I would put myself in that category where you are kind of perceiving the energies of the other people, and you're also trying to read them. So for me, when I am in conversation, or when I am in a group or with someone, I kind of feel that even if my intention is being mindful in the conversation, that I am kind of pulled away constantly by all the other things that are happening. How do you deal with that? Or how what's the mindful way of being with it, with these kind of pulls? That's like, oh, these are, yeah.
Well, and this is where you point to, there's a mindfulness practice, which is to cultivate literally just like the state of being aware, right? But then the question is, what do I do with all that awareness? Like, great, I'm aware of all this stuff. I'm aware that I'm like really overloaded in my senses because I'm in a large group of people and I'm a sensitive person. And so I tend to register all of those things more intensely. Well, now I've been practicing mindfulness and now I'm even more aware. I was already really aware, just because I'm sensitive, but now I'm noticing how aware I am.
Yeah.
And so what you point to is actually practicing mindfulness. It can become overwhelming. And it's really important to highlight that as much as there are benefits, there are also some really difficult things that can come out of mindfulness practice. And sitting with your mind for an hour a day isn't for everybody because it's a lot, right? And so your question is, okay, so what do I do?
Yeah.
And so mindfulness itself is the practice of listening to yourself. And then for me, where the coaching part comes in, whether it's in more than transformational life coaching kind of side or in the like language learning coaching kind of side, it's okay, you're aware. And then the coaching part is, what do you do with that? Right. Which is a different thing. Right. And in the Buddhist tradition, I really pull on the idea of like right action. Is part of that. And right action is simply action that's informed by your awareness in the present moment, and also your awareness of possible outcomes and how things can play out.
Yeah. But that involves judgment.
It does.
Because I am, that's also something that I do with my clients is, you be aware when you're in conversation with someone and you're bring a little bit of attention to the how are you feeling, at least, like, because I think that's something that tends to be overlooked. We are in conversation and we keep going in conversation, even if we are feeling discomfort or we are feeling some weird kind of stuff. And I think that it is very important to bring the attention to this that you are feeling, and then you have to judge it.
You do.
Then
you do.
It's not mindful anymore. Right?
But is it not mindful? And so this is a really great question, because with mindfulness practice, what you get down to like this like minute level of like something happens, I experience it, and then I have to do something with it. And there is a judgment. And the word that comes to mind for me is discernment. Right? And so it's discernment versus judgment.
Okay, tell me more. Tell me more. Yeah.
And what's interesting is, for me, it's the part of it is the feeling of those words. For me, like, they have a very different feeling in my body. And to me, they also have different associations. So for me, judgment is like good, bad, right, wrong, you know, all of those more like maybe it has to do more like moralistic kind of things, or whatever, rules and shoulds and stuff. And then discernment is much more intuition based, but it is still a form of judgment, right? Like, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So somewhere in there, I have made a judgment of what the right thing is to do for me in that moment.
So if I understand, this would be, so we are in conversation, I am feeling uncomfortable, I am feeling something, so I discern,
Mm-hmm.
or I make a decision how to act. I'm not judging it right or wrong. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, the response to this is what's right for me, is this course of action.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not judging it right or wrong. I'm not saying this person is making me feel uncomfortable, or there is something.
Yeah. And I hate this so much. And so forget
Yeah.
this person because
Yeah.
whatever. Right. It's slowing the whole process down so that you say, okay, I notice I'm feeling uncomfortable. And instead of just going right into the narrative about it and what it means about me, about them, about whatever, it's taking a moment,
Mhm.
pause, and in that pause, making a choice about what to do.
Yeah, and that could be different for even in the same situation from different people. Just the situations may seem similar, but maybe the way you decide to act is different because your intuition is kind of telling you, well, you're safe, or you can continue, or no, you better leave.
Yeah.
Or
And this is why I struggle with any coaches or teachers or anyone who says this is what you should do in the situation, and this is when you should set a boundary, and this is when whatever, because even for me with the same person, maybe around the same topic, today I have more space, and I'm more open to it, and then next week I don't have as much space. And so if I tap into the bigger skill, then this is what you should do when you shouldn't, and these are rules which play into our judgment.
yeah,
Right, is learning to listen to ourselves and learning to understand what signals mean inside of us. Like I might feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort might not be, oh, this conversation is going horribly wrong and we need to go away from it. No, that discomfort might be like, ooh, we're getting into like some tenderness and I feel vulnerable. Right.
yeah,
And then I might discern like, yeah, this is a safe person for me to go there with. Like I might pause and say, yeah, I actually want to keep talking about this. Or in that vulnerability, I might say,
it's
this
too
isn't
much.
where I want to go
Yeah.
right now. And so the whole idea is that you slow things down and you reduce the narratives. That's the idea. It's not that thoughts go away and you have a magically clear mind and whatever, but it's that you, rather than just reacting without thinking to everything, or reacting with lots of thinking, really is what it is.
Yeah, and I'm
Without
loving
pausing.
this. I'm loving this. Like it's just like I feel butterflies in my stomach right now. It's like yes,
Oh, that's nice.
yes.
Yeah, it
And
feels
it
good to me
is,
because I hear myself and I'm like, yeah, that is what it is, because we forget.
yeah, and it is.
Forget.
I have the feeling that I keep saying all the time to everyone, just slow down the conversation.
Yeah.
Basically, because that's my domain, as you know, is languages. So slow down the conversation, because it is in the space of not doing anything. It is
Mm-hmm.
in this in between moments where you're feeling something and you decide to do something, where the I find where the wisdom is, where
Mm-hmm.
the discernment is, and it has to, like, it is so important. And I also love the what you mentioned about that it is individual, because it is something personal.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is no right or wrong to any situation. It comes down to the person experiencing it, and what's going on in that moment, and
Mm-hmm.
that could be different. So I think that as coaches or teachers, or I think that there, I hope that at some point the the giving blueprints for everything kind of stop, or giving rules, or you have to do, if this happens you do this, or if you're feeling this way you do that,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think it is actually positive
Mm-hmm.
for.
And the other thing I see is if this person is doing this, then that means this about them also, which is like the same, different people can do the exact same thing and it can mean something completely different to each of those people. And so mindfulness
Yeah.
then also extends not only to our internal experience, but to other people. And one of the fundamental qualities, one of the ways to check in and being like, am I engaging with the situation, myself or the other person or whatever mindfully, is, am I curious?
Yeah.
Right? Am I curious about myself and my internal experience? Am I curious about my discomfort? Or am I like, forget this, I'm not interested? Am I curious about what's going on for that person who just like snapped at me for whatever reason? Or am I immediately just reacting and dismissing them and having my habitual response? Right? Yeah. And to get really meta, like, it's also okay to not be mindful. Right? You know, like, that's also not for everyone in every moment. Like, if we're in a really intense situation, we might not have time to like pause and whatever, you know. So also acknowledging that, like, there's no, it's not like, ooh, mindfulness is like better than whatever. Like, there are times that mindfulness is not called for and it's not the thing. And the more we cultivate it, the more freedom we feel to choose how we deal, even with the hardest and most complex situations. So
yeah, I love that as well, because I don't know, if you're feeling unsafe for whatever reason, I personally don't see how am I going to have the space of being curious about why this person feels threatening to me.
Exactly.
Like I think I want to run, even if that person has a very valid reason and everything in theory is safe. It doesn't feel safe to me.
Yeah. And I think often what happens is mindfulness can be used to bypass also some of our really immediate instincts, right? It can get twisted into this idea of like being patient with things that you don't need to be patient with. It can get twisted into extending your boundaries rather than listening to them, right? Like,
tell me more. Yeah,
I'm going to bring curiosity to everything and every situation, but when actually this person is treating me like garbage, you know, instead of sitting here and being like, oh, I wonder what's going on for you and whatever, you know, not every situation calls for that.
Yeah.
Right. So there's also discernment about, when do I give that gift of my attention? When do I open myself in that way? Right. And that's an internal mindfulness process too, right? You know, and so it's like you can't escape it. And it gets really nuanced. And my hope in talking about it this way is to say it's both really simple in its actuality and what it is. Like, it is literally just paying attention. Like, if you really want to take out all the other words, because paying attention, there's no judgment in paying attention, technically, you know, if you really want to get down to like the nitty gritty of what it is.
Yeah.
And so it's what you do. It's what you do with what you pay attention to. And so you could be paying attention to the fact that I don't have a moment to pause right now. And that could be what it is, right? So the act of it is very simple. The application is complex. Why? Because humans are complex. Life is complex. If we bring this mindfulness into the realm of language, expressing ourselves is complex. And so when I work with people who are developing their English skills, you know, when they've been taught English like it's math, you know, I see that floating. I don't know who to credit that original meme to that I saw in, like, you know, the language teaching world. But when you teach language like math, you think of it like math, but, you know, it's this verb and you conjugate it this way and the sentence structure is this way, and, you know, you're plugging the plug and play method of whatever. But language is way more than that. It's communicating a lot. And so applying mindfulness to language, like, yeah, you're paying attention, but there's a lot to pay attention to, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot to do with that practice within self-expression or learning another language or whatever.
Well, you initiated that. So mindfulness and languages. So you say that to your clients, you talk about mindfulness. So that's part of the teaching, or that's part of your work. I don't know if the coaching. Sorry. So yeah, what is there to pay attention to in the context of language? And I know that's well, as we were saying, we are humans, and in language and communication, there are so many layers, and it touches so many areas. But what is there to pay attention to?
I think one of the biggest things um, speaking of mindfulness, I'm just noticing like there's so many that my mind is like this example and this example and this example. But I think the thing that stands out the most and what Oren is created to do is to support people who are getting stuck. But that is like the resounding complaint of my clients, because Oren is specifically for advanced students who have a lot, they've done the math part, they've learned the tenses and whatever. And yet they struggle with, I get stuck. I don't feel like I can completely express myself fully, and what do I do with that? And often they're like, okay, I want to learn more vocabulary. I want to practice my grammar. And all of that is valid. It's totally important. But what I help people to do is to say, okay, like what's actually going on underneath that though? Because you have a lot of language, but the struggle is being able to use what you do have. Right? Being able to access that. And so that's often where mindfulness comes in, is like, okay, in that moment where you feel stuck, what is going on? Yep. What are the thoughts in your head? What is happening in your body? Right? So even just that's one very specific application of mindfulness that I feel like I can stay there with a student for months, just working on that one point, and then being able to find a choice in that moment instead of just feeling like I'm locked up and I, have no other words to express what I want to say.
Yeah, and I so that's also what I do with my clients, and that's something that I struggled with as an English speaker, non-native English speaker. So I remember years of stuckness, even though I was doing exams and my writing exams were like fly colors, it's all good, and then I am in front of people and there is no English. There's nothing in there, or super basic expressions and vocabulary that is super frustrating for the speaker.
Exactly. And what you feel, and I'm also bilingual in Spanish.
Yeah.
And I have the same issue. I had the same issue in Spanish, and I had this like watershed moment that shifted everything for me. And I feel like my whole job as a coach has been like, how did that happen for me? And how do I help create that for other people? Because it was a bizarro experience for me, where all of a sudden I had a friend where she was from Colombia, and I was like, oh yeah, I speak Spanish. And so we would start out speaking Spanish a little bit sometimes, but inevitably like I would get stuck and start to feel whatever. And so we would go into English, where eventually we just stopped speaking in Spanish.
Yeah.
Because I was just like such a mess about it that we just stopped. And I was a therapist at the time, and there was a group where that was all in Spanish. That therapist had to leave. I had an intern who was a Spanish speaker, and so he was going to take over the group, but needed a supervisor with him as well to hold that group space. And I 100% understand Spanish, it was great, but I was nervous about my speaking. And so I told the group up front, I was like, y'all, I'm here. I understand everything. If something comes up, this therapist and I will might communicate in English, whatever. The group goes on, and all of a sudden this everyone's talking, and this desire comes up in me like, oh my God, there's so much I want to express, because I'm in my therapist role and I love being a therapist and I want to connect, share things. And I was like, I'm just going to do whatever, I've already given my disclaimer, like whatever comes out is going to come out. It was the most fluent I have ever been. It shocked me. It shocked my co-therapist. And for the 4 or 5 weeks that I helped run that group, I was like, what just happened to me? What just happened? And it was because my attention was not on the language. My attention was on what I'm trying to say. And the most important thing to me was, I want to express this thing that's inside of me, and I want to share it with you, because it's so important to me to share this with you and to be able to connect with what you're saying to me and to reflect that back for you to be seen. But the language was a secondary tool to help me do that.
Yeah.
But it was that I put my attention on the real purpose of language, which is to communicate and to connect, right? Yeah. But when we learn a language, the focus is on correctness. Are you saying the right words? Is your sentence structure right? And if we stay there, we're stuck there. And there's a huge distance between me and what I want to say and this thing that I'm doing out here, which is speaking another language, right? Like they're not connected.
Totally. And for me, I think it was a bit different because I find that for me, I totally understand what you're saying, that when you are in the moment, you are present in the moment, like those kind of fears go away. And I relate when I am scared of heights, but there was this situation when I was taking care of kids, and we were doing, what's the name of this thing that is up in trees, like you have trees and the trees are connected in and you have to walk on, and there are
oh, is it like a zip line?
Yeah. And I had to do that with them, and we were going higher and higher as the kids were going. And there was a moment where I forgot my fear because I was just paying attention to the kids, see that they were okay and everything was fine. Mm-hmm. And I was just going up and jumping and doing everything on the air. And then at some point, I looked down and I couldn't move. And that was the point where I said, okay, well, I'm going down. And I just straight away went down because I felt I couldn't be there. My legs were shaking. And that was because I was present. Mm-hmm. I could do it. So I totally relate to that. But for in the context of language and my English story, for me, what happened was, what was blocking me was paying attention to the other. I was
your attention was so much on the other.
Exactly. So how are they judging me? Am I pronouncing correctly? And how are they judging my accent? How are they judging my pronunciation? How are they judging? And trying to read their signs to see if I could feel relaxed or not relaxed.
Yeah. Is this safe? You're scanning. Your attention was on safety.
Yeah. Totally. And in the moment that I started to pay attention to myself in that conversation and discerning if, okay, well, I am feeling in this way, but I am communicating the message. I can communicate the message. If this person reacts badly, or if I feel this person is judging me, that has nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. That really has nothing to do with me because I have a ton of vocabulary. I know English. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, like unconscious positive affirmations to yourself. Like, I do know this and I've got this. And why am I,
Yeah. And slowly I built up my confidence. So for me I wasn't confident on that I could first. And then I was so focused on the other person. That's like, well,
exactly.
I just couldn't find my words. And I would say a word, but I would immediately, I use a new word and immediately look at the other person's reaction.
Did it land? Is it right?
Was it okay?
Yeah. Because it sounds like you were anticipating their judgment in order to judge yourself, to try to regulate yourself. And so it was this like, that's a lot of work when you're also then on top of that trying to say what you want to say too. It's like a lot of things to do at once. And I feel like for me, it was a parallel because with my friend, it was like, I don't want to sound stupid and I was afraid to make mistakes and all this stuff. And the funny thing is what happened after that group, like in my role as a therapist, I felt more confident, less nervous, but then I would go out into the world in other situations and speak Spanish. And then I'd be back in my nervousness and whatever. And so while I had this breakthrough moment, very similarly, it was a practice where I had to, and I was like, I didn't understand what happened. Like now I can say what happened retrospectively, but in the moment I was like, why can I all of a sudden like speak Spanish the most fluently I've ever spoken it, but 2 weeks ago I couldn't talk to my friend in Spanish. Like what happened here?
Yeah. Right.
And then when I saw that and then speaking in the world and feeling very similarly, like worrying about judgment, do I sound stupid? Do I sound whatever? It's bringing the attention. It's where you put your attention makes a huge difference in terms of being able to express yourself. Obviously, vocabulary is great. All those other things are really helpful to get really specific about the nuance of what you want to say.
Yeah.
And I love doing all of that too. But there's this like foundational piece that's kind of like a key.
Yeah, totally. And from what I am seeing in the conversation or hearing in our conversation, So being mindful, putting where do we put the attention in the conversation when we are communicating in a language that is not our native language? It's not on the language.
Yeah, not always.
Or not, yeah. So how, yeah. Where are we putting our attention then? Are we putting the attention on all the other elements, or?
It's a good question. I'm thinking for me of things that different activities and exercises that I do with different clients. And I think it depends on the activity that I'm doing. I would say overall, the two places that I invite people to put their attention are onto their internal experience.
Yeah.
Right. So what's happening inside of you? Because if I'm stuck, I need to attend to that first. I need to attend to that stuckness and whatever I need to do to take care of myself in that moment so that I can then bring my attention back to the conversation and to the connection and either the message I'm trying to communicate or the message the other person is trying to communicate to me. I would say those are probably like the two biggest points of attention.
Yeah. And I want us to talk a little bit about the authenticity, because when we are in a conversation, when we are using our language, I find, and I don't know if that's for you, is something that happened or not. Did you feel that you were authentic when you were speaking in Spanish, that you were expressing, I don't know, your personality, or that you were expressing yourself beyond the use of words?
I think that was the shift. I think that was one of the biggest shifts in that experience that I then kind of like integrated over time. Was I think before then I could communicate information.
Okay.
Right? Language was a vessel. So language, to me, I think of like language is a vessel that carries things, or it points to underlying things. You know, I'm a big fan of the like finger pointing at the moon, idea of language can point to ideas and concepts, but it also kind of like carries things. And so on the boat of language, if I'm just putting like where I can buy my groceries and using the taxi to get into the center of the city, whatever, like, yeah, okay, language could carry that for me before that moment. But can it carry my deeper feelings? Can it carry my personality? Can it carry like you're speaking about, like my authenticity?
Yeah.
I didn't know that it could. Like a part of it was just like trust in myself, trust in my skills, all of these things, my fear of judgment, all of that stuff. Like I didn't want to put them all in that boat because I was like, it's just gonna sink. It's not gonna get there,
Yeah.
And the shift was when I brought my attention away from the language itself and more towards me and what I wanted to communicate. That's when I started to feel like it could happen, and it could happen more, and I could close that gap. And maybe to just keep extending this metaphor, like the boat could, like, got a little bigger.
Yeah.
But I think it's challenging because you see it a lot talked about in the language learning community too, about, do you feel like yourself, or do you feel like your personality is different in a different language? And I feel like there's truths to that. And I feel like the influence goes both ways. Like a language kind of influences me, and I also adapt a language. Like I pick up phrases that I particularly like, and it's this like mutual influence. I see your excitement. Say more about that. Go on. But yeah, I mean, that's my experience. That's my experience. I mean, my husband is Cuban. And so and I live in Catalonia, where they speak Catalan, and Spanish is the second language here. Castellano, Spanish is the second language here. And so there's all kinds of dynamics going on with language and identity and culture and all of this stuff. And, there are certain words that I just like say in Catalan because I see them all the time. And so I say them in Catalan, and my partner and he'll say a word in Catalan when he meant to say it in Spanish, and then we're speaking in Spanish and English, and you integrate these different things into your personality and in jokes between us. The ways that we use Spanish or English between us, the ways that we use Spanglish between us, right, are unique to us. at the same time as it's influenced certain things that we express. Like I was talking about being angry, and I was in a meeting and I was like, all I can think of is the Spanish expression of like, I'm going to tell you 4 things, which to me, I love it. I love that expression. I could not think of another way to say it. Right. So it's become a part of my voice.
Yeah.
You know, so much so there's like, I can't even think of another phrase right now that feels that feeling that I want to say when I say that phrase in Spanish. So
I love it. This moment, I think I just melted with pleasure. Like, yes.
it's so real. It's so real. And I think that only happened when I dropped this like formulaic, I need to pass the test. You know, I'm worried about that other person, what that other person thinks about me, perfection, whatever, all that, those judgments, those thoughts. When I brought my attention away from those and more to truly expressing myself, that's when it shifted. And it's an ongoing process. Like it's never ending. It's never ending. It's not like, oh yeah, I 100% feel like myself in Spanish when I speak in Spanish now. But
I love that. I love that. And I think, you know, I have my background is teaching. Like I've been teaching language for over 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. And
a lot of wisdom accumulated in that time.
Yeah, no, but what I wanted, but there is wisdom, but there is also, I am looking back at the teacher of the first years, and correction was the thing.
Yeah.
Like you have to, I was teaching Spanish, and my goal in my mind back then, and for many years, was this is Spanish in this box, and my only job is to pass this box so you can express yourself within this box.
Yeah.
Which now I look back at that, and of course it was valid, and I was I was inserted in what teachers do with languages and still do today. But it just breaks my heart. It is painful to see how my role, I thought that my role as teacher was to break the soul of this person. It's to break
and then put it back together in this box.
Yeah, their self-expression. I was not helping, I was not helping in their self-expression. Partially, maybe yes, I was facilitating them to use another language, but I wasn't helping them to express truly in that language, because correction was there. So if they said something wrong, because their background or their mind would say like, that sounds kind of correct, I'm going to say it this way, I was there saying, no, this is not correct, you say it this way. I don't think there is a space now, or even looking at the future, this trying to control the other person expression. Like, who am I to tell you that what you are saying is incorrect in this language? You are using the language and what you're saying, as long as I can understand the message, like the focus should be in the message, not in the tool, in the in the boat, is what's in the boat, right? And
exactly.
So,
and I feel like in a world where in the language learning world, where the boat is the focus, the structure, and all of that, it's important, right? Because a boat is not going to float down the river like if it's just completely falling apart. So there's like total validity in wanting to tend to that boat. But what's so interesting to me is that when I work with students, I always acknowledge that, because most of the time that's the 2 things out the gate are I feel stuck, but then very immediately followed by like this tense and that tense and prepositions and articles and whatever, like, you know, the particular thing, which has complete validity, but that's more those like structural things of the boat.
Yeah.
And what always happens is I say, yes, okay, I hear that. Those are all things like we can work on, we can practice with that. And I want to look at the other part. I want to look at what you're putting in the boat. I want to look at how you're using it, how your relationship to that boat, because I can teach you prepositions all day long, but they're not going to stick with you if your mind is so absorbed in just that.
Yeah.
Right? If that's your main focus, then you're losing the purpose of the boat. You're so focused on the boat is not going anywhere, and it's just sitting there and you're just working on it. And so many people are like, I'm going to sail this boat when everything is perfect. And for a real boat, that's probably what you want to do, but this is a metaphorical boat. So it's not that, right? It's like you can actually work on this boat while it's sailing. And to me, it's way more important that the boat is sailing, and then we'll address those other things to keep it sailing smoothly, to, you know, if it sprouts a hole and we see that, and we're, or whatever, we'll attend to it. But I want to get the boat moving.
Yeah.
Then let's take care of the other stuff, right? Which we can. But like you're saying, I know I had the same thing for me when I first started out, even coming from a therapy background. My first, I was like torn. I was so torn between correction and making sure everything is right and all of this stuff. And it was when I, as a teacher, was bringing mindfulness to my own teaching and what was coming up for me, and how was I feeling when I was interacting with students.
Yeah.
How would I feel when I like give corrections or when they receive them? Or how do I feel when they're so desperate to get the grammar and the all of the stuff, when I can see that there's a lot of other stuff going on? And I started listening to myself, discerning, right, and making a different choice and experimenting. And it was so exciting to me to see how people were like, oh, yes, like this is the thing.
Yeah.
People are taught to look for their own mistakes, right? Rather than looking for like what's actually going on under.
Yeah, I love that. And I am deeply saddened that we have been talking for a while.
I didn't even realize.
Yeah,
I was not being mindful of the time itself.
There you go. But
I wasn't paying attention.
We were mindful of each other.
Exactly. See, you can't be mindful of everything all the time. We'd go crazy. We would lose our minds.
I love this. I really, really like this conversation. And I just, if I had to take away just one thing, it is towards the end, this idea of what you are bringing attention. And it is not just the language as known as boat. This is as the thing is floating, is going.
Yeah. We get the boat going.
Let it move.
Yeah. And I think for me, hearing your experience of that moment where you were like, wait a minute, I'm paying so much attention to this other person and what's going on for them, which is to say, like, that's the key. And you put it in a different way and had a slightly different experience than me, but I really resonate with that. You know, that not giving that judgment or that other person or what they might think so much weight in life in general is what can bring us back to ourselves, including in our self-expression and language.
Yeah. And I think reminding ourselves that the purpose of language is not language itself.
Yeah. It's not to pass a test. Exactly.
Well, if you are in school, yes, but other than that context, it's not.
And even when it is, right? Like I work with a lot of people in business where their job promotions depend on English, and their boss has been straight up like, if you don't fix your grammar, if you don't fix this stuff, like this is getting in the way of you getting a promotion or whatever. And so they come to me with this need. And so it's not that we don't address that, but it's that often it's true that it's not the boat itself, it's that they're so nervous. They're so worried to make a mistake that they make more mistakes.
Yeah, totally. There are so many things that affect our expression or our everything, everything we do. There are so many things that affect that it is quite, what I find is part of the why we are here in this situation with language is that we have had this tendency of put things in boxes. So languages is in a box, and language, it doesn't affect any other things, or it's not affected by other things, when it is not true.
Yeah. Especially because language, like mindfulness, it's a tool.
Yeah.
But we use that tool in so many different ways and for so many different purposes, right? So again, it's that simplicity. Like, language is like words and tenses and structures and whatever. That's what it is tangibly, but what it does is so much more than that. And how we use it and what we use it for, is so much larger than that, that if we just, it's the same boat metaphor, is just really sticky today. But it's like, if we just focus on that, you don't learn how to wield it.
Yeah.
Right. And often people feel like, oh, English, in my case, teaching English, oh, English is this foreign thing and I don't quite know what to do. I don't know what to do with it, whatever. And they don't see it as the same way with their native language. It feels like an extension of them. And it feels like that tool that it is, right? It's an integrated tool. And the learned language is often like this thing out here that I like kind of grab it and like move it around and try to get it to do what I want it to do, rather than being like, oh, it's this tool that's integrated in a part of me and I get to use it in that way.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. There is nothing more to say to that. I just love everything you said.
Me too. It feels really great to be able to nerd out and connect about this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for the space.
Yeah. And well, it's my pleasure. And it's for me is the intent is, as I said, I was saying to you before, is bring the focus out of the language. Like, how is language relating to all these other things? Because I think that that's what actually can help us to use the tool in a way that it is more, like, I know, wholesome and complete and nice. Something that doesn't feel aggressive. Like, sometimes I feel that the relationship we have with languages is super violent. It's like, I feel in the past I used to feel that English was punching me in the face, and I just wanted to grab it and break it. Because you feel so frustrated with it.
Yeah, it feels like an adversary rather than feeling like an integrated part of yourself, which, oh man, another day is taking me on a whole other tangent about internal family systems and parts and how language relates to that. That could be a whole other thing.
Well, we'll have another conversation.
Yeah. But I think it's that integration, right? That integration that we're looking for.
Yeah, you make it part of yourself, because you're entitled to use it. There is no, there is right and wrong way of using the tool, but more often than not, I think that we are going to use it when we have a certain base, and in very often when we start a conversation, we do have a certain base to communicate. We can use it. Like, is the knowledge is there. Is just being able to just to focus on the conversation, on the connection, and maybe it's okay if I don't have words, because I can use body language, or I can use my native word, and the other person is going to get it. Because I think that right now we can allow ourselves to be a little bit more fluid with, now I'm probably in the past as well, but now I see that with all this traveling, with internet, and we are exposed to other languages, that I think we can afford to not be correct and proper in one language all the time. You can, relax and just focus on the communication, focus on the message, focus on connecting with the other person, rather than, am I being right in my intonation? Am I making mistakes?
It's like thinking about any painter, and it's like thinking about them saying, I'm going to wait to make this painting until I have every single line and I know exactly where it's going to go and I have everything completely together. No, it's built as you go, and in response to what you see and in response to what you feel, and you paint a line, you're like, oh, I didn't really like that, and you do another one, and it's much more malleable than we're taught that it is. It's much more flexible. Yeah. And I really think that we are, and I hope we continue to be in a space where it's okay to have that space around, mixing languages and bringing in words from other languages and all of that. I think that really facilitates connection.
Yeah.
Which is the point, right? It's the point.
It is. So with this, we are going to end the conversation, but I think we are going to have more.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Yes. So, well, thank you very much just
Yeah,
for
thank you.
joining on the call, and just it has been a pleasure for me. I had my moments of, oh my God, I just want to hug you right now. So, yes.
Screen hug.
Yeah. So that's all for this call, and thank you for showing up and talking.
Thank you.
Bye.